the effective rate I've been paying? Well, it's probably closer to the 15% rate than anything, because my last 10 years, my income comes overwhelmingly from investments made in the past rather than ordinary income, or rather than earned annual income. I got a little bit of income from my book, but I gave that all away. And then I get speaker's fees from time to time, but not very much.
Mitt Romney talking about his taxes back in January. We learned a lot more today when he released his 2011 returns. A nice battleground America. What will all this mean for the campaign? Joining me now, CNN political contributor Hillary Rosen, Town Hall News editor and author Katie Pavlich, and Henry Blodgett, the CEO and editor of Business Insider. Henry, let me start with you, because you're the big business brain here, not to be disparaging to my two other guests. You studied these figures. Does he get a pass, Mitt Romney? It seems to me, just looking at them, anyone that gives $4 million to charity in 1 year, you can hardly accuse him of milking the system too much, can you?
That's right. That's impressive. He's been very generous. He's given a lot away, and certainly it could have been worse if they had had to say, look, there were 3 years where he paid no taxes. That would have been a monstrous story. On the other hand, 14% tax, 20% tax rate, vastly below what a normal person would be paying on ordinary income. And part of what Romney has done so effectively has been to shelter his income as investments and pay a much lower tax rate.
Can you only do that if you're a very wealthy guy?
Yes,
is that the bottom line?
Real message when you dig into the tax returns that have been released, is the tremendous sophistication and expense required to effectively avoid taxes as well as he has. You know, that's not available to everybody in the country.
Hillary Rosen, what do you make of this?
Well, I think Henry's right, and you know, Romney's tax return looks somewhat alien to the average person. You know, it's multiple pages, and it's got foreign earnings, and it's got tax shelters in Bermuda and the like. And so I think the key issue for Mitt Romney isn't whether he's generous. The key issue for Mitt Romney is whether he really understands what the average person goes through. And I think that he's sort of written himself off and actually being able to sell himself on a platform of lowering taxes and helping America, because he was so disparaging of 47% of the American people who, in effect, also lower their taxes by being either in the military or getting an earned income tax credit or having mortgage interest on their house. You know, so taking sort of the few deductions available to the real middle class. You know, he can't say, well, we're just going to lower taxes on wealthy people and then attack folks who try and get a little bit of tax benefit themselves. I think he has ruined this issue for himself.
Let me turn to Katie Pavlich. Put up a stoic defense for me of Mitt Romney and his taxation.
A stoic defense. How about I just give you some of the numbers here? In 2011, the Romneys donated 30% of their income to charity, $4 million. I take a little bit of issue with you saying that he's gaming the system when he could have deducted $4 million in charitable donations.
Yeah, but hang on. No. You have pressed the wrong button there, because we all know the reason that he hasn't deducted that extra money. If he had deducted it in 2011, he would have fallen below the 13% threshold and would have therefore exposed himself as having told a large porky pie, where he said he'd always paid at least 13%. So we're not stupid. He did this for political expediency. Of course, the irony of doing that is that he ends up contradicting himself also about the amount of tax he pays.
So you're arguing that it's a problem that he donated more to charity in order to avoid a lower tax rate? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But
I think if he hadn't said the 13% threshold existed for all his returns, then he would have done what anybody else would have done and claimed those extra charitable donations as deductions. And anyone who thinks he wouldn't have done that is living in cloud cuckoo land.
Okay, but Mitt Romney has paid, on average, in the past 20 years, a 20% effective tax rate. And the person who's telling lies here is Harry Reid, who's eating his words tonight, because he went on the Senate floor and accused Mitt Romney of not paying any taxes in the past 10 years. Well, guess what? He's paid taxes, state and federal, for the past 20 years. In the past 20 years, he's given, on average, 40% of his income to the government, to charity, and to his church. So I think
that's a very good point. Let me go to Hillary Rosen. That is a very good point. Doesn't Harry Reid have to stand up now and issue a public apology to Mitt Romney?
Well, my guess is Harry Reid would feel better if he actually saw the returns instead of a letter from a bunch of accountants swearing that Mitt Romney paid taxes.
Well, you're saying the accountants are lying?
No, I'm just saying
said,
I'm not sure that Harry Reid is feeling too contrite about this until Mitt Romney actually shows what he's done.
Yeah, but I
the
think,
issue,
I think, let's just stop for one moment. I think he should be feeling contrite. I don't think it's good enough that Harry Reid stands up with all the power of the Senate behind him and basically says Mitt Romney paid no tax, fact, when it turns out to be an absolute load of baloney. I don't look at these figures and feel outraged.
I'm not sure that we need to feel outraged at Mitt Romney's personal situation. And I agree with Katie. He's extraordinarily generous giving all that money to his church. What I think we should feel outrage is sort of the double standard by which he's operating now and saying that this goes back to the point that Henry made thoughtfully, which is that he, has a huge amount of advantages because of how he earns his money as investments rather than, working in the fields or plowing in a manufacturing plant. And how he earns his money favors his tax status. And that is what's not fair right now for so many people, because he himself is criticizing those who are paying a lower rate based on their deductions.
Well, listen, let me go back to Katie Creed. I'll come to you, Henry, just for an overview in a sec. But, Katie, on that point, I mean, there are two different issues here. One is his tax returns, in which I think he gets a reasonable pass, actually. But the 47% thing I felt was terrible for Mitt Romney. It showed a kind of arrogance. It showed a lack of understanding of who these people were that he was talking about. Many of them are his voters in red states that would vote for him quite happily. And I thought also it showed a really kind of rich man's detachment from the real world. Talking about people being victims in the way that he did. Very sneering, very condescending. You must admit that that was a bad, bad moment for Mitt Romney.
I actually don't think it was a bad moment for Mitt Romney, and I think that his tax returns and the release of them in full, and I think that actually it shows that this is a man who has donated over $50 million in charity and paid taxes to the government throughout his lifetime. So therefore, he does have concern for the poor. He does have concern for the 47% who is dependent on some government programs. He's paid into the system, and therefore, he does understand that. But I want to go back to something that Hillary said really quickly. She said Harry Reid might be more interested in looking at these tax returns if he saw them in full. Well, the IRS commissioner came out with a statement saying Mitt Romney and the Romneys together have fulfilled their duties as taxpayers and abided by the law. So to accuse him of somehow hiding something in these tax returns, even though they haven't released them in full, they've released summaries of the past 20 years, I think is just not fair.
OK, well, let's just hold that thought. Let's have a little break, come back and talk more about this. It's clearly got all our hackles going. We just have to try and work out whose hackles are right. Back we now, CNN political contributor Hillary Rosen, Town Hall News editor and author Katie Pavlich, and Henry Blodgett, CEO and editor of Business Insider. We left the viewers on a cliffhanger there, Hillary. You were about to respond to Katie Pavlich. I would imagine not in an entirely complimentary manner, so far away.
Look, I think that we can all stipulate that Mitt Romney gave a lot of money to charity, but he also earned a lot of money. And I think what we have seen over the years is that the policies that Mitt Romney holds for himself, he doesn't hold for other people. And I think when we look at his tax plan, that's a pretty good place to start. So the only difference between Mitt Romney's tax plan and the president's tax plan, everybody wants to lower effective taxes for people in the middle class, but Mitt Romney also wants to give the wealthy an additional tax break. When you look at a guy who's only paying, 13 to 14% a year, it's hard to imagine. And those kinds of deductions are available to most wealthy people. Why drain the federal budget more? Why cut education? Why cut health care? Why cut so many important things to give more guys like Mitt Romney a tax break?
Yeah, okay,
that's
Henry,
what his policy does.
Henry, let me go to you. I actually think that's a pretty valid point. I mean, I think the one thing that I do not detect the average American man and woman on the street crying out for is more tax breaks or increasing the period of tax breaks for the wealthiest people in America. People like Mitt Romney are absolutely fine. They don't need any more help. In fact, if anything, looking at these tax returns, he could pay quite a lot more tax. He's clearly got so much income, he's giving away $4 million a year to charity. That's way more than he normally has. So he's got lots of disposable income. He doesn't need more help from America's financial system. So how do you think this plays out for the election?
Well, I think his entire economic plan has been based on the idea that we have to give more money to the job creators, the investors and the entrepreneurs, and that is people like Mitt Romney. But you look at the tax returns, you see how much money there is already. What is more money going to do? And the problem in the economy in the U.S. right now actually is not an investor problem. It is a demand problem. It's that the middle class doesn't have enough money. And so if you're going to give someone a tax cut, great. Go to the middle class. There's certainly no evidence, actually, that tax cuts really help the economy. Congressional Research Service
in fact, often the reverse is true.
That's right. But if you're going to give a tax cut with the idea that that's going to stimulate the economy, then give it to the middle class, people who need it and will spend it, because Romney will not spend all of it.
What we have then is a clear line of demarcation for this election, don't we? People can now make a real choice between the Romney-Ryan way to go and the Obama way to go.
Absolutely. And I think going back to the tax returns, the other issue is that don't forget that Mitt Romney's father came out and said, look, any politician should release 12 years of returns. Yeah. So that was part of what started people saying.
And Mitt Romney made his VP candidates, by the way, that he was vetting, release 10 themselves.
That's right.
So there's a bit of hypocrisy there.
You want to see it. And so now we have the high-level details. But the thing is, if we got the returns, we dig in, and even if everything was defensible legally, you would find that Mitt Romney has likely taken advantage of some of the most outrageous tax loopholes in the system. And it would be great if he were to come out and say, look, the first thing I'm going to do is eliminate these loopholes that helped made me incredibly rich because they're ridiculous. But he won't say, I'm going to eliminate these loopholes because people will react negatively.
Final word for you, Katie. You haven't spoken in this segment. A very, very quick answer, please. Do you ever wish that Mitt Romney was worth about $300 million less? That he was like a regular guy with a regular income, maybe worth $3 million?
No, I don't, because you know what? The reason why Mitt Romney can donate so much to charity and effectively help people through private enterprises and not through a bloated federal government is because he has a lot of money. If Mitt Romney was worth $1 billion, I'd be happy with it.
Katie Pavlich, Hillary Rosen, and Henry Bodgett, thank you all very much.